Hi guys, welcome back to chapter 20. Now for this chapter, we will be going through the different lighting and how they work and what their properties are, as well as how we can mix and match some lighting with HDRI, with meshes, and produce some interesting effects. Now without further ado, let us begin. So the first lighting we're going to talk about is when we open up a new scene. Usually we'll have a cube, a camera, and a light. And now, as you know, this is the point light. And I don't need to explain too much. You guys probably know that it just shines 360 degrees. And that it's like a candle or energy ball in real life. So that, yeah, it produces light all around, like a sun. And then obviously, like all lights, you can change the properties here in watts, and this will change how light it is, and then also the color. And lastly, by making the radius of the light source small or big, you'll get harder and lighter shadows. So if, for example, our radius now is 1.84 meters, now our shadow is really soft, but if we have something like a candle, then obviously the shadow will become really strong. So this is a point light, and from point light we can just go and switch it into a spotlight right here. Now, so this is a spotlight, and just like a point light, it produces light obviously, but then what this does is that it gives you a direction, and with it we've also played around in our previous chapters on how wide this will cast, so there's not too much that we have to worry about. And this is how we can, rather than controlling the radius to define the edge, there's a control which is here, so you can produce a harsh or a light rim with this spotlight. Okay, and now next in our list is our area light. So with the area light, you can change its shape. Usually it comes in square. It's usually square, so you can change the size of this. And with the area light, it's like the softbox that is usually found in studios. So it gives this nice overall lighting that is rather soft, unless you make it into a small one. But usually with area lighting, we're using it for its size. So it produces a nice even light. And now it comes in different shapes: ellipse, circle, square, rectangle. So you can change this into however shape you need. For example, if you're going for that LED strip look, then you can just change this. And then with this, you can also change the amount of spread that you want. So this is like a really focused one. So it's almost like a laser scan. So you can go here and it scans your object like a laser. Okay, so these are the main lights. And then there's another light that we use, but not so often. And it's the sunlight. The sunlight is really bright, and it's controlled by its strength. So now let's just make it to 5 or 2 so we can see it better. So the sunlight is a light where it doesn't matter where you place the source. You can place it anywhere, but as long as you adjust the angle, then it will change. For example, if we want our light like this and we move it, it will still cast the same angle because it's mimicking the sun, which is somewhere off far into the distance. So even if you move a meter, there's not going to be any changes to the shadow. Okay, so now this is for all the light. And now there's another type of lighting that we have used a lot, and that is the HDR lighting. So let's go now to the world by going to the shading tab. From the object nodes, we switch to the world nodes, and then here you can change just like an overall shape of what you would like to use. This is one of the options. You can have like an overall general purple glow or whatever. So this is just with one color. And with HDRI map, let's insert the environment texture. And let's Control T so we get our mapping. And let's go to HDRI Haven, the images we've saved from there, and let's say put in this texture. So we just drag it here, and now we have our HDRI lighting. As you can see, it's reflecting the surroundings. And if you don't want to reflect the surrounding like what we did before, we can always go to Film and turn on Transparent. And now we just have whatever we're modeling without seeing the HDRI sphere on the outside. But at the same time, we can always see a certain reflection. Okay, so that's with HDRI lighting, and we control the strength obviously from here. And we can add different things like hue saturation if we want to make the different colors, make it more saturated, or black and white lighting, you can do that. Or you can add a mix that we have used before. So if you have like a forest, but you want the forest lighting to be somewhat of a dusk-ish color, so it's rather red. And now we have like a color that is reddish, but we're using the same HDRI lighting. Let's change to another one where we can see a hotter light. For example, this one. So now the sun is really, really glowing orange. Okay. And we can control the surround by controlling, we can control the direction of the light by controlling how the HDRI lighting is moving. So just imagine that outside of this, we have a whole sphere. So let's turn on. And then this whole entire sphere is our HDRI map. And then with mapping, we can control its direction like that. And then sometimes if our lighting is needed, we can fake like the angle of the light, so we sort of keep the sunlight as well as the skylight, but at the same time we can fake the angle, because if we have transparency on, no one's really going to tell, especially when you don't have such a reflection. So why use an HDRI light? It's because HDRI light not only gives us the sunlight, but it also gives us the surrounding reflections. Whereas if we just turn on our regular light, we have a white light and we have a black shadow. So the shadow is really lacking any sort of detail. But if we turn on our HDRI lighting, for example, in the shadow, you can see a bit of orange from the ground here, and you see a lot of blue from the skylight. So it gives us a realistic surrounding regarding the light. Okay, so now you may ask, what if I want to have, this lighting, but if for my render, I want it to have a different surrounding? Let's turn on this again. So if I want my surrounding to be, a snowy field, but here it's showing that it's in a forest clearing, right? So how do we do that? Okay, so first let's copy this, and let's choose the map that we want. For example, we want this snowy field here. Okay, and now we go to, and now we add a mix. So it's the same as before. We add a mix color, and now we're mixing the color together. And now you see them blending together. It's not really what we want. So now we will add a camera ray. or it's called a light path. And then with the light path, we can move the camera ray to the factor here. So now we have our snowy clearing, but at the same time, our lighting is still from our old map, which is this clearing in the hilly forest. And with this, we can control our light, but then our surrounding HDRI will not move. But as you can see, the reflection here is still different, right? So we need to change that. And how we do that is we can go here and add a math node with an add, and we will change the reflection to here, camera ray to here, and let's change the value to the factor. Okay, so now for the surroundings, we have the snowy field. In our reflections, we have the same snowy field. You can see that it's snow in there, and at the same time, our lighting is still based off of our previous HDRI. But you can notice that our whole entire scene has grown a lot brighter. It's because a lot of the shadows actually come from the reflections. For example, if I were to add a mix, and I'm to turn down the reflection and turn it up, you'll see that our reflection is causing our geometry or our objects in the scene to look brighter or darker. So that's the part with reflections. And there are many options here, so you can also play around with it. You can use the shadow from the previous one, so then and you can use the diffuse map. So all these things you can add together and play around with the kind of reflections. So that's with HDRI lighting. And next we will talk about the lighting from textures. Okay, so for this one, let's just change this back to 0 and open up our light. Okay, so with textures, we still need to go back and go to object, and let's just add a texture to our box here. So I'm going to add a texture. This is the Greeble. You can download it from the 3dtextures.me, and I just cut out the red parts in here and created an emissive. So now I have this emission, and then when I plug it in, the red is glowing. So you can also do that by, if you take a look at the map like this, you can just use Photoshop to easily select all the reds and just place them into a texture. Plug that in, and then you'll have your glowing parts. And now we can turn the emission up to like 10. So now it's looking a lot like a tesseract. Yeah, we can even change the textures a bit. Wow, so this now looks really, really cool. Okay. And now with the reflections, you'll see that, okay, this is casting light. So this is another way of casting light. It's a light source. Okay. And then we have the emission coming out of, for example, we have a light coming out of this little street lamp that we have in our scene. So let's put it in the dark spots, and we can turn this off. So now we have the glow from our cube, and I'm trying to find our street lamp. Okay, here. And we have a tiny bit of a light. Now for this one, we can, just turn this up to 1000, and you won't still see it. but you will still see the glow here. It's definitely gotten a little bit lighter, but you won't notice the detail because you can't use emission to mimic a light source. So what we do is that we can go here and add a light. And for this one, we can use either an area light or a spotlight. So here we'll use a spotlight. Let's change this to 100 or 1000. And for a lot of scenes with lights like this, with a source, we won't be using the actual emission from the source, but we will be adding a source, a light source to this. So then we can mimic the effect of a street lamp, and then with that we can mimic the amount of blend that it has, and then we can mimic the amount of spread it has, as well as the radius, so it casts a different kind of shadow. So this is how we can mix light sources with our geometry. Okay, and now we can also, so this is the case where we put the light source outside of the mesh, but we can also put the light source inside the mesh. For example, let's go to light and let's add a point light. So it's a light that is 360 degree, and then let's give it 100, or actually 500, or 100 is fine, and then let's make it red, so it's the same color as our tesseract here. And now we can place this in the cube, and you won't see anything. Now we can unclick cast shadow, and then all of a sudden you'll have the light coming out of it, so it's not being affected by any of the meshes, so it's not casting any shadows whatsoever. And now if we just reduce this to maybe 10 or 10 or 20, so now we get that the tesseract is casting light, but at the same time it's a lot brighter than what we had before compared to this. And if you really do want to mimic, you can also just put it here, change it into an area light, and let me see, let's change the size so it's smaller, and then change the spread so it's smaller. So then so it's almost like it's the texture that's casting the light, because it's mostly casting around here. So that's the light that we can place inside our mesh to mimic light. Okay, and now for the last part. Lights are actually the same as our objects. As you can see, our objects have nodes that we can use to edit it. With lights, it's also the same thing. If you go to your light option here, you'll see here is a choice for use nodes. Okay, so now we have our light that we can control with our nodes. So one thing that we can control with the nodes is this. We can add a black body node to the color. So now we can control the color by temperatures in Kelvin. So as you know, typically a candle is 1500 to 2000 degree Kelvin. So it produces a reddish or yellowish light. The lower you go, the redder it becomes. So the lower the temperature, the redder it is, and the hotter the temperature, 8000 degrees, the whiter and bluer it looks. Usually the highest is 8000, but we can, let's make it a 10,000, so it becomes a little bit more bluish. So this is the black body temperature color that's based off of real life. And you can use this to get an accurate reading of color temperature. So if you're adding a candle to a scene, you can just simply just put in 2000 and then make it a point light, and this will be like a candle light that's being casting light. Okay, and another thing is that if you notice how, let's go here, go to IES library, that a lot of times the lights on your walls, they're not just the typical kind of light that we are seeing casting here. So it's not just like, okay, you have this oval and it's a little smooth, there's a gradient and that's it. There's a lot more things to it. For example, it can appear with these little spikes with different halos. So then that is what IES is. It's sort of like this data that's used to mimic actual spotlights. So if we go to browse, we can see that there are many different types of IES profiles that we can just download for free. It's taking a while. For example, here, this is sort of the lights that's coming out of a flashlight. So you're making a flashlight scene and you want a realistic looking flashlight, then you can add in this IES profile. Or if you're doing some interior design renders, then you can also add different profiles depending on what you like. So for us, we will be experimenting with one of them. I've already downloaded it here. And then what you do is you can go here and then look for an IES texture and then set this to external. And we can go here and plug in our external profile and now change this into the factor. Now this is really strong. So we can go ahead and turn that off. So now you see that there are two halos here, and then we can change, and now whatever we change here, it's not going to be affecting the shape of our light rays, such as this. There's no more option to allow you to change the spread, but then you can see that there is two sort of rings around our light. For example, if we take this off, then it just becomes the regular light, and if we plug this in, then we get another light source. So let's push this closer to the wall, and then it's easier to see here, like that and that. So these are the options that you can use to create, like all sorts of different scenes now in Blender, because lighting is really important, and it can just make something look really crappy or something really nice. Even if it's just placing a few random objects together with really good lighting, it can make the scene look really fantastic. So yeah, that is all for lighting in Blender, and I will see you guys in the next chapter. Bye bye for now.